It's Jflood201 on IG, coming at you live from Respect the Grind. Again, that's Jflood201 on IG, coming at you live with Respect the Grind. Reacts. So we are going to react to Battle in the West Bank. This footage is recent. It's fresh. I follow Vice Media. They just uploaded this to YouTube. We're going to react to it. The Battle in the West Bank refers to a conflict in the Middle East that is going on between Israel and Palestine for a long time now. The problem really started picking up heat in the 80s and 90s and has followed us into the 21st century, into the 2000s, and is one that felt like in the 90s and in the early 2000s, it felt like we were maybe making headway. Then all of the issues in the Middle East, have compounded. The war in Iraq, which America fought and got its allies to help. Just everything about the Middle East is a clusterfuck, let's be honest, right? So it's interesting to check in with certain issues. This issue has been gone on. Essentially, this issue has existed throughout my entire life, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Is that I was born into a world where this was a conflict, this was an issue, this is a problem, and I feel like I'm going to exit a world where this is still an issue, a conflict, or a problem. The Palestine versus Israel, right? The Palestinian conflict, the question as to who has rights over this land, over this territory, is at the root of the issue. If you didn't already know that. Probably most of you who are tuning in already are familiar with the issue, want to watch the footage with me and just see the reaction. Most of you know that I have a master's in political science from Fordham University, so we are going to get in depth about this kind of stuff. You can react, you can at me, you can write in the chat, I'll answer questions if I know the answer. I grew up around Israeli families and Israeli culture, in the sense that where I'm from in New Jersey, there is a strong Israeli community and there's a large Israeli population in comparison to like your typical suburb, right? Like your typical suburb might not have as much of this Israeli influence or influx as like living right outside New York in where I live has given me. So I have some insights. I myself am not Jewish. I wasn't raised Jewish. I'm familiar with the faith and some of their beliefs. I don't identify with Israel. I've never been to Israel. I'd love to go. But I don't identify with Israel in the sense that I myself am not Israeli. It's a nation. It's a culture. It's an identity. And it's the same with Palestine. Being Palestinian, it's a nature. It's a culture. It's identity. So there's like a major conflict here because it's like it's tribalism. It's a people versus a people. It's land versus landowners. It's all that stuff wrapped into one. So we're gonna watch this here. I'll break it down. Sorry for the long intro. I always give a long intro, but we're gonna get right into it. This is Battle in the West Bank by Vice Media, and Jflood201 reacts for Respect the Grind. Yalla.
We're with Palestinian fighters in Jenin camp in the West Bank. They're currently conducting a training exercise because this has become the location of increased fighting between Palestinians and Israeli forces.
Okay, so shout out to her. She's such a badass. I don't know if you guys watch Vice Media, but she's a badass. She knows like 4 different languages. She's always traveling to the hottest war zones. I gotta admit, like she's kind of a badass. I definitely admire her. She's cool as hell. The reporter.
وشفنا اليوم ايش قاعدون يسوون.
منور اعتيادي يومي تدريب اعتيادي يومي فشباب.
So these guys are Palestinians. These are not Israelis, and it's hard not to notice the American weaponry, right? The M4s, the AR-16s, the AR-14s.
المقاتلين في المخيم
The M4s.
للحفاظ على أمن المخيم وحماية المخيم وحماية أبناء الشعب نفسي مخيم جنين.
وش قد منكم أكو؟
Like those are American weapons, right?
في مخيم جنين هو مقاتل للحرية. إحنا هنا مخيم جنين 74 سنة بقاتل. 74 سنة صامد يواجه هذا الاحتلال.
Jenin refugee camp was formed in the years after 1948, when thousands of Palestinians were forced out of their homes by the creation of Israel.
So that is fact. I know that I'm going to get some heat from my Israeli friends for this stuff, but that is fact. There was a huge movement, influx of people after the Second World War to reclaim Israel is the Zionist Movement. And it did displace people. To say that it did not would just to be lying about history. Now, a lot of the people that were displaced, some of it was not forced upon them. They were moving because there was an influx of people that were coming with wealth. So some of the Jews who left Europe were able to leave Europe with some of their wealth. You'll hear stories about people melting gold into hangers, right? That's the classic one, getting the hangers out of the country. And then, the Nazis think that they're just hangers, but really it's, silver bars, gold bars and all that shit. So there are a few, not a lot. I'm not saying that the majority of Jews got out of Europe safely. I'm not even saying the majority of Jews who made it to Israel were wealthy. What I'm saying, though, is that there were a few. There's some of the population that made it to Israel was able to bring their wealth with them. So there was this new distribution of wealth and new influx of people, which is going to either create opportunities or it's going to create it's always going to create winners and losers, right? As new things happen in an economy and in a world, there's going to be new losers and winners, especially something like the creation of a new nation, right? The creation of a new national identity.
It's located in the West Bank, a Palestinian territory which international law says is illegally occupied by the Israeli military. The camp is one of the poorest areas in the West Bank, home to some 16,000 Palestinians living in less than half a square kilometre. These fighters from different political factions who call themselves the Jenin Unit say they're responsible for protecting it. Some Palestinians say that this is now the epicenter of a resurging armed resistance against an Israeli occupation. This is one of the only places where you'll see armed Palestinian fighters in the West Bank. Jenin camp has been a flashpoint between the Israeli army and Palestinians since 2002, when Israeli forces invaded the camp following a series of suicide bombings inside Israel. 52 Palestinians, including women and children, and 23 Israeli soldiers were killed.
23 Israeli soldiers and 50 women and children, Palestinians. Something that I notice that Israel likes to do is do the American thing and not admit their mistakes. That is something that America has, a long history of. If we make a fumble or a bluster, if we make a mistake, a military mistake, you look at the war in Vietnam, you look at the war in Iraq. Those were not victories, okay, per se. Not in the traditional sense. There's always a way to spin everything. But one thing that America does when it does something foolish, like the Vietnam War, when it does something foolish, like the Iraq War, where we kind of get in over our head, or we do not anticipate the long fight, the numbers and the death toll and that kind of thing. Israel does the same thing with its Palestinian conflict. They won't admit that they've hurt women and children and stuff like that when it's like documented and stuff. It's like there's pictures, there's and I'm not trying to bag on Israel. I'm just saying that they have a very, like, Israel and America are very similar with how they treat foreign relations and how they go about admitting mistakes. They essentially don't. They politicize it. You know what I mean? So yeah, we're just gonna keep going from there. I want everyone to understand that she is taking like a Palestinian point of view in the sense of how she's talking about acts, because there are acts of violence on both sides, but I think that she's doing a fair job of talking about Israel's role in this conflict.
Hundreds of houses were destroyed, leaving 3,000 people homeless. In the years since, the IDF has continued to regularly enter the camp to arrest Palestinians. What's your primary role here?
الهدف الرئيسي هو الحفاظ على قدسيتنا، الحفاظ على رباطنا بهاي الأرض، إثبات وجودنا بهاي الأرض، يعني والاستمرار في القتال وفي النضال وفي المقاومة حتى يحل هذا الاحتلال عن أرضنا.
Since the end of March this year, 18 Israelis were killed by Palestinians in 5 separate attacks. Officials say that figure includes 14 civilians. 4 of the attackers, including a man named Ra'ad Halden, were from Jenin. The Israeli military says its current raids are focused on finding accomplices. Israel says that it's increasing its operations because people like Ra'ad Halden came from Jenin camp, kill Israeli civilians, and are trying to kill people in Israel. What do you have to say about that?
هذا الاحتلال الذي يدخل دون سابق انذار يفرض سيطرته على هذا الأرض، يتنصل ويتنكر لكل الاتفاقيات والمواثيق الدولية، مثل رعد الكثير من ذهبوا على مذبح الحرية في أراضي 48. مخيم جنين من 74 سنة يقدم الشهداء ويقدم الاستشهاديين ويقدم الجرحى والأسرى.
As a result of the attacks, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett announced Israeli forces would respond with an iron fist.
Typical. Populism is on the rise in Israel also, as well as the Trump rhetoric. There's similar rhetoric out of Israel. I've met a number of racist Israelis. I've met a number of people who equate pride in Israel with pride in the Jewish people, and then that has in turn kind of almost become a new brand of racism. I've heard and seen things from members of the Israeli community that have the rhetoric of kind of like the same rhetoric that you'll hear from white supremacists about migration, an influx of migrants, the idea of a migrant being a non-white or like a non-Israeli or a non-Jew in their lands is pretty common, because if you're returning to Israel and you are Jewish, it's considered like going home. It's considered like a return to your land or your people, and you're almost like welcomed. So if you're moving to Israel and you're not Jewish, to maybe to have access to a better economy or better, better school system, better toilets, better plumbing, right? Like all of the, what do you call that? Like the standard of living. If you're seeking a better standard of living in order to, when you're moving to Israel, you're not always going to be met necessarily with like a welcoming community. Now, I'm not saying that you aren't, and the majority of the time you're going to be, but there are elements in, Israeli politics and Israeli culture that kind of like feed off this populism that we're noticing. Like Trump is really like giving it like a lot of fervor. The idea of like the white people being replaced. There's a lot of that in Israel of like we're going to be replaced by these non-Jews kind of a thing, and it's anyway. There's shared overtones, and I'm noticing it, and I just want to call Israel out on that. Is like there is Israeli populism. To not support the Israeli army is to not support Israel. And those two should not be the same thing. You should be able to criticize a country and a country's politics and a country's foreign policy and even a country's armed forces without like disrespecting them or like trying to take away their national platform or discredit them. Like, I'm not discrediting Israel by saying that it's made mistakes. It'd be the same to go against the United States and say, oh yeah, look, the United States does everything right. We're the best. Like, come on. Okay?
פעולה מלא לצה"ל, לשב"כ ולכל כוחות הביטחון על מנת למגר את הטרור. אין ולא יהיו מגבלות למלחמה הזאת.
NGOs say that at least 39 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since March. The number includes 7 children and American-Palestinian Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was in Jenin when she was shot in the head.
Jesus, they shot a journalist in the head.
16-year-old
Israel shot a journalist in the head?
Sanad Abu Akleh was killed by an Israeli soldier in Jenin. In communication with Vice, the Israeli military claimed it shot at armed militants and pointed to photos of Sanad posing with a gun taken from social media at a completely different time. But footage filmed on the day shows him responding to the raid using stones, not guns. And multiple cell phone videos and photographs taken from different angles and seen by Vice News show the moments before he was shot whilst trying to reach an injured man who was also killed, and the moments after. No weapons are visible in his hands or around his body. هون
يزيد بقى الثاني هناك مصاب.
I have heard people who were former Israeli soldiers joke about killing people who are throwing sticks and stones. And I'm just saying that. It'd be the same as saying, like, you know, I didn't have friends that joked about killing, you know, Iraqis. I've met people who, you know, made light of what they had to do in war. And I do want to frame this in, I think that the Palestinians see this as resistance and freedom fighting, and the Israelis see this as terrorism. And they're thinking there's a bunch of terrorists throwing stones. Well, who cares if one dies? You know what I mean? It's kind of their attitude. And they killed kids, you know, as a result. Like, you know, like, you don't know what kind of, that kind of talk is going to result in action when you actually get out there. I have a friend who's in the Israeli Armed Forces and has been there for a long time, and I think he's gotten to the point where he's, you know, in the special units and is doing, you know, like, pretty serious shit. Like, he's their version of Navy SEALs or whatever, you know, the Mossad type thing. And he just has a very black and white attitude about it, that if you are against Israel or that if you are, you know, for Palestine, you are anti-Israel, kind of a thing. And I want us to explore this gray area of where we can criticize a great nation like Israel and still be historically accurate. You know what I mean?
ورد يساعده
يساعد بس مساعده بس طلع على السيارة كده حياه هون
سند تصور ركع هون وفيها سيارة
بين سيارة في كمان واحد في عنده بين سيارة
تخلص عليه مرة بعدين قلت تاخذوه موت الولد يعني مصيبة كونه يعني مش عامل شيء يعني أنا بالنسبة لي يعني أنا يوم يعني بعيط عليه يوميا يعني بده ينقذ إنسان بتروح بطخوه مش مشكل يعني ابني مش مشكل عليه وكبر بكى وقتلوه.
Can you explain what it's like, what impact it has when you lose your son like this?
It
يعني
creates
أنا
hatred.
صار لي تقريبا
It must.
اليوم بشتغلش قاعد معقد نفسيا مش عارف اشتغل لا أنا ولا أولادي مش عارفين نشتغل الدار ناقصة يعني فضي شيء.
And has anyone from the Israeli government or the Israeli military reached out to you since your son was killed by them?
ولا حدا خلص قتلوه راحوا.
Israel says that Jenin camp is a location where there are a lot of people who want to kill Israelis or they sympathize with militants. How do you respond to them?
ما اعتقدش انه يعني احنا قتالين ولا احنا سفاحين ولا احنا شعب مسالم. هم ما يجوش عندنا على بلادنا وانا ما بصير شيء. ما بصير اي شيء، لا بصير قتل ولا بصير مراجعه ولا بصير شيء. هم اللي بيجوا يدقوا بينا، هم اللي بيجوا يتحرشوا بينا، هم اللي بياخذوا اولادنا على السجون وبقتلوا اولادنا، هم مش احنا.
بدنا نموت عشان الاكيد. وصلنا على نفس الدرب هون صرنا كلياتنا يعني مشروع شهادي كلنا. يعني فيش اشي بده يخوفنا واشي خلص من ضل صاحبنا راح فقدناه. عمين نستنى. فيش.
This is getting dark fast. I'm kind of getting choked up here, guys. Yeah, this is getting dark fast. I mean, these are young men talking about martyrdom and dying like it is, like it's a predestined thing. Like they are, because they are Palestinian and because they live in this camp, because their friend died, you know, and they're raised in a culture of religion. They're raised, and what else would you turn to if you are, you know, not 21 years old and your friends and you know, your peers are dying around you, and for a cause that is inherently right in your eyes, your land, your people, you know, your freedom. Like is there anything more American than, and people used to say this when we invaded Iraq, right? Is like, if you're an Iraqi young man, if you're an American young man, and tomorrow North Korea said, you know, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, you guys are more like Korean than you are American, so we're going to take over that area, and we're going to bring all these Korean people, and you know, we're going to turn this into like part of Korea, because there's already a huge Korean population there, and you know, that's what they really want, it's what they really desire. We're liberating that Korean population by annexing New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. Now, this is a total hypothetical. I'm just saying. The result would be tomorrow morning when the Korean army showed up in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or whatever, people would have their guns out, and people would be ready to shoot them and kill them for coming here and doing that. And I think that we need to understand that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter at times. I'm not saying all the time. You know, killing innocents is never a way to get anything done politically. You know, and I can tell you that as someone who has a master's degree from an accredited university in political science, trust me, is that there's no, like, there's militarism and there's hardball stuff in like national politics and on that level of like presidents deciding things and stuff. But like for the majority of politics, like there's no, violence is never the answer. And it's certainly like, yeah, it's just like bad politics is what you'd say, right? Is it that like you can't hurt people, and if you're out to hurt people, you shouldn't be in that field. Politics is a field about helping people and representing the people that are around you, at least in its American ideals. All right, we're gonna continue here, but I started to get choked up. I mean, these young men talking about martyrdom like it is like it's nothing, you know.
The frustration and anger with Israeli authorities in Jenin was also visible in Jerusalem at the AlAqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites.
Yeah, I think they beat up. So I think the Israeli army beat up some people who were at a like a burial, or like, you know, like they were. It was just poor. It was very crass, and it was very poor judgment on whatever the policing situation was there at the time. You basically see like these Israeli guys like with fucking billy sticks, just like whack, whack, to these like civilians that are clearly there for worshiping, you know, and you're just like, fuck, this is bad. This looks like Charlottesville, you know what I mean? This looks like the protest on the Capitol. This looks bad.
Jewish people believe Al-Aqsa is also the location of their sacred Temple Mount. And during Ramadan, some far-right Israeli nationalists who want the mosque under Jewish control were escorted onto the grounds by armed police, enraging Palestinians. Meanwhile, many Palestinian men were denied entry.
You see what I mean? Like, bro, they're just there to worship and get you guys out of there. The result is they're gonna shoot some people.
That is Israeli police on the grounds of Al-Aqsa. It's bad. Palestinians have been throwing stones at them. There's been sound grenades thrown at Palestinians. It's got very dangerous very quickly.
Damn. Yeah, see, that's how you create enemies, motherfucker. Like, it's just true.
On one occasion, we were with a group of journalists who became surrounded in both directions by Israeli police.
Journalists! We're journalists!
Like, all they see are Palestinians. You realize that? Like, it's really become like us versus them. Like, I know so because I've talked to Israeli soldiers. This is how they're thinking on the ground. I guarantee you this is how they're thinking on the ground. Those guys in those SWAT uniforms, you think that they're not police, they're military, okay? And they're thinking that they are there to do exactly that. Military operation. We're there to protect whoever is in the mosque who's Jewish. We are not there to protect anybody else. We're there to protect the Jewish people that are there to worship, right? And in order to do that, we need to get all these people out of here. So they're just like, it's a military operation in their mind. They are there and they're executing tasks. They don't care that you're journalists, you're in their way, like you know, and all they see are Palestinians. So that to them is enemy. Like, they're trained to see Palestinian, boom, that's an enemy. That's a North Korean. That's or you know what I mean? That's a terrorist, right? Like, that's what they see. Like, and it's the same. Like, when you train a soldier to see an enemy and get ready to kill, it's different than training a police officer to assess risk. And so much of our police force is being militarized that it's really, like, you can see it internationally in these situations where it's like that there should be police there, not military, and I can't tell the difference. But I'm pretty sure that's Israeli military. I don't think that's police. And if it is police, I can guarantee you they're not thinking like police. They're thinking like soldiers. They're thinking, I see the enemy, get him out of here.
Others were shot with rubber bullets.
Oh, so they shot them with rubber bullets. That'll teach them, you know?
For the first time ever, drones were used to drop tear gas over worshippers.
Wow, they use drones to drop tear gas.
We thought everything had ended peacefully. I can't see now. And now there's tear gas. We need to get out. Let's get out. Get out. All of these people are women and children. I can hear children just coughing their lungs out.
That's definitely not good for people. Like, you can't just airdrop fucking chemical. Like, you know, like, damn, bro.
While inside AlAqsa compound resembled a battleground, outside, an increasing number of Israeli civilians are arming themselves. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett called on any Israeli with a gun license to carry a weapon after the spate of killings carried out by Palestinians. In order to get an Israeli gun license, you have to carry out one of these weapons training courses. This company is called Caliber 3. They have shooting ranges in different parts of Israel. And since the Israeli president...
Yo, Americans are doing the same thing, by the way. I can't tell you how many of my friends are getting straps. Like, everybody. Everybody. Alright, well, we're going to get... That's the bank. And they do need something from me, but we're not going to pick that up. We're in the middle of doing this, so let's keep going.
Called for more Israeli civilians to carry arms. The number of people who've applied for gun licenses have skyrocketed.
They're politicizing the same things that we are here in America.
Think of taking up a gun and using it. Definitely.
Would you be prepared to use it?
I'm not buying a gun just for show. I'm buying it because, sadly, you can see the latest events in Israel have proven once again that there are still people that want to kill us.
The gun range is located within the occupied West Bank, where Palestinians are legally prohibited from owning guns. It was built to host tourists looking to get a taste of Israeli army training by simulating car bombings, stabbing attacks, and letting visitors shoot at cardboard cutouts of Palestinians.
I'm gonna shoot, so don't be afraid.
But you're shooting directly.
Can you believe this?
Sharon Gatt, a former IDF colonel, runs a show here. He trains soldiers, security guards, civilians, and tourists. This place is wild.
Thank you.
How did it come about? Like, tell me about it.
My vision is to make the world a safer world, teach the military, teach anybody that is an Israeli or a friend of Israel how to protect himself, his family, his community, and his country. And in basic words, fight evil all over the world.
Who is the evil?
Evil are terrorists that come for no reasons to kill innocent people. Doesn't matter what their religion is. A terrorist can be from any religion, but these are evil people.
How many are you training, for example, week by week?
Civilians, we're training 1,000 every week.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot.
That's a lot.
A lot.
Where we are right now is the West Bank.
Right.
So you have Palestinians who are living under martial law who are not allowed to be armed, and then you have Jewish Israelis who are allowed to be armed in the same area. Do you not think that that creates like a two-tier system?
That's a political question. I'm not a political guy. I'll tell you, the Jews over here don't do the terror attacks. Who does the terror attacks in Israel are Palestinians.
Do you think that Palestinians, civilians, who are innocent, who haven't done anything, should also be given the opportunity to be trained and hold a weapon to protect themselves?
That's a good question. They have the Palestinian authorities, so you should ask the Palestinian authorities, not me. I'm not the Palestinian authorities.
But you, as an individual who trains people to defend themselves and to protect themselves.
I think that any person in the world should have the right to protect himself, 100%.
You're saying a lot of the terrorists are Palestinians. How should the Palestinians who are killed or innocently killed, the children, the women, how should they protect themselves?
How should they protect themselves?
Yes.
They're well protected, I think, by their the Palestinian forces.
We're just outside of Jenin.
It's a soldier trying to, like,
the IDF.
That's a great example of a soldier wanting to avoid politics while being completely embedded in them and not understanding it. Like, you are embedded in politics. By doing what you're doing, you are facilitating change in your community. And, like, even if that's a good thing, I think that we can all agree that, like, people who are civilians and stuff, like, what he was doing was not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Training Israelis to protect themselves is good. Like, I'm not against Israelis owning guns or, like, protecting themselves. No, what I'm against is this idea of, like, right, she's saying, like Palestinians can't do this is really what he's missing in that whole thing. And he's basically saying, like, it's not my job to make sure they are. And I kind of agree with that, but what he doesn't understand is that there's nobody advocating in the same ways that they're advocating for Israel. Israel has a bigger budget, a bigger, all this stuff. It's got more stuff. And it has a better relationship with the United States, which definitely has carried over into all these new brands of politics and these new ideas going on in Israel right now. The populism that you see in the politics, the guns, the gun ownership going up inside Israel. This is them identifying with America and adapting forms of American culture. Gun ownership is like uniquely American. I'm sorry, but it is. For the majority of, like, the first world, or like the people who can afford, who have internet connections, who have a smartphone, who, you know what I mean? Like, these people, if you're American and you're in that group, you might also be a gun owner. Like, it's not a stretch. And to watch that come to existence inside Israel is really interesting. Now, I'm sure that there are some Latin Americans out there who are going to say, like, oh, like, if you were raised in Latin America, you're raised around guns and stuff. But that's because there's a lot more farming and stuff going on. I think a lot of the guns that you still see in, like, rural parts of South America are still going to be more like, rifles and stuff that are kind of more associated with livestock and protecting your livestock. Anyway.
In the raids inside Jenin, and he's going to be talking to us about what they've been doing. The IDF brought us here, to part of the 700-kilometer wall that cuts deep into Palestinian territory, dividing Palestinian communities and land. It's been deemed illegal by the International Courts of Justice, but Israel says it's needed for security.
אפשר לראות את התופעה הזאת, נכון לעכשיו כל הגדר סגורה. מ-500 ומשהו פרצות לאפס. להיום בבוקר.
Colonel Max Nudelman is the deputy commander of the Judea and Samaria Regional Division in the IDF. After the attacks on Israeli civilians, Israel's prime minister came out and said that Israeli forces had full freedom to act in the way that they wished. How have your operations changed since the attacks took place?
עצם העובדה שיש כל כך הרבה חיילים על הגדר היום, ונוצר מפגש על הגדר שבעבר לא היה נוצר, מייצר פה לפעמים את החיכוך שמביא לפצועים, ובחלק מהמקרים גם להרוגים.
How do you make sure that innocent Palestinians are not killed?
בוא נגיד ככה, אין שום סיכוי שבמצב כזה או אחר, משימת הכוח מגיעה למצב שצריך להיפגע מישהו שהוא חף מפשע. לדוגמה, הרוגים בג'נין, אפשר להגיד ב-100% שכל ההרוגים בג'נין שבאו בחיכוך עם כוחות צבא, הם אנשים שהחזיקו נשק.
But what you said doesn't fit in with the facts or the figures that we see at all. Just this year in 2022, 8 children have been killed in the West Bank now. Children, they're not, and we've seen some of the videos of when these children have been killed, they're not armed. They might have stones, but they're not armed. That contributes to the anger that you're seeing, does it not?
קודם כל זה באמת נוגד את זה בטח לא מתכנס לא למדיניות ולא לצורך. וצריך להגיד את זה, אני אומר את זה גם בצער רב. בסוף זה אנשים מול אנשים, ברוב המקרים.
So this soldier is really quite smart and brilliant, really, because what he says is at the end of the day, it's people versus people. Now that's someone who really understands humanity, who understands that the enemy is not the enemy. It is a person. It's a dad. It's a brother. It's a cousin, right? It's someone to somebody, and that's really powerful. I don't think they could have picked a better person to interview in this instance, and I think that this person is speaking extremely well on Israel's behalf, and he really helps you understand how complicated the issue is and why Israel has so much dog in the fight to say. And it's because they are a unique and wonderful country that was created after a terrible, terrible tragedy in Europe. And their history as a country is one of ups and downs like anyone else. And so, you know, maybe to criticize them is to also criticize America, right? So it's nice to see an Israeli person who is very much aware of the humanity of war, and someone who's unfortunately embedded in it. So this is a great interview.
בכל המקרים שבהם נפגעים ילדים זה בהכרח טעות חמורה, שככה גם אנחנו מסתכלים עליה כטעות חמורה של כוחותינו, אבל עצם החיכוך הזה, הקבוע, לצערי, מייצר בסוף גם נפגעים שהם לא בהכרח היו צריכים להיפגע. בין אם זה ילדים, יכולים להיות גם מבוגרים.
Sanad Abu Ataya, who was killed on the 31st of March, he was unarmed. There are videos of him moments before he was killed. As an Israeli soldier who takes part in these raids, why are Palestinian children dying like this?
אני אענה לה בצורה מאוד כללית, בסדר? כי קודם כל לא מכיר את המקרה הספציפי של הילד. עד כמה שזה נשמע אולי פרדוקסלי מה שאני אגיד עכשיו, אבל אין לנו אינטרס להרוג אנשים תמימים. כולם מבינים שזה מייצר, או יכול לייצר, את המחבל הבא הפוטנציאלי ולייצר איזשהם פיגועי השראה או לצורך העניין שנאה בתוך אותו תא משפחתי כלפי חיילים ומדינת ישראל וצה"ל. יש בעיה שלדעתי אלפים של כאלה שמחזיקים אבנים, לא כולם מתים. הרוב המוחלט לא.
Sanad's father says as long as the West Bank is under...
You know, like, that's as good of an answer as you're gonna get, though. Like I feel for the guy.
Israeli occupation, Palestinians like his son are destined to suffer.
هاي الاحتلال. أيوه. قتلوا أولادنا وأطفالنا. بيدعوا بكل اللي بيقتلش الأطفال هم اللي قتلوا الأطفال. أيوه. على الطفل هذا شو.
كم مرة تجي هون؟
يوم بعد يوم.
صعبة عليكم؟
كثير.
وش تفكر لما تجي هون؟
جينا انتهت. مو غيرش مستقبل أصلا. نفس كل يوم نفس اللي قبله، كل يوم نفس اللي قبله، على الفاضي يعني. اكو غاز هناك وهون فوق، كله شهداء، كله شهداء.
You know, it's really interesting to see how much faith is embedded in their identity, and to see how much they turn to their faith. You know, when it comes to bad things like you're losing a child or something like that. All right, I've got to get this, guys. That's it for me. We're definitely going to talk more about stuff like this. I hope you learned a lot from the video, but that's it for me here at Respect the Ground.